This interview is brought to you by people just like you. This first launch on Patreon and to YouTube members, so a big thanks to them for backing. If you would like to do so, you can go to patreon.com/SafeStatePlus or become a member here on YouTube. Greetings and salutations, everyone. I'm your host, Dustin Furman, and joining me today is Colin Moriarty of Last Stand Media, who is graciously pretending I nailed this the first time and didn't forget to hit record. Colin, how you doing today?
It's good. We only went a couple minutes. It's not a big deal. I'm well, thank you. And I was saying, we technically have audio backups, so it's like, if you wanted to use it, you could. But I appreciate, the showmanship of getting everything on video. So I'm well, man. It's good to be here with you today.
It's great to see you. The reason you're here is because Last Stand Media is about to celebrate 7 years of victorious content creation. How does that feel? How does it feel to have launched something about history? I think your first video was something about George Washington, or just...
It was the Third Amendment. Yeah.
The Third Amendment?
Which no one knows what it is. That's why I wanted to do a video on it.
I watched it and I don't remember what it's about.
You don't have to quarter foreign soldiers in your house, or your own soldiers in your house, which is from the Revolution.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I appreciate that one. You started on history though, and now you've been doing it for 7 years. Mm-hmm. After about a year, we'll get into all of the history in a little bit here. I think Sacred Symbols was a big deal for a lot of people because they missed you talking about PlayStation. But first, I just want to ask you, what is it like hitting a milestone of 7 years? Is that significant to you? Is the 7 year mark notable for any reason?
No, well, to be clear, it's the 8 year mark, because we started in 2017. March 2017. I just can't believe we lasted this long and that it became what it became. I really just wanted to do something for myself and hopefully make some money and survive. And it's turned into a hell of a lot more than that. So I can't believe it. I'm a very reluctant leader. I don't like being the CEO of the company. It's a lot of not recording, a lot of just doing nonsense all of the time. Talks with lawyers and accountants and trademarking things and it's like, just I want to put a fucking gun barrel in my mouth sometimes because of it. But it is like a great situation to have found myself in, and I'm surrounded by really great people, like the strongest group of people I've podcasted with since the days of IGN. When you had a really vaunted group of, David Clayman and Charles Agnette and Greg, of course, and Clements and you, McCaffrey, Damon. I mean, the family that we've put together at Last Stand reminds me and is reminiscent of that family. And so, I owe a lot to that era too, but it's as I was saying before we started, I've done this longer than I was an editor at IGN now, which is wild. Yeah.
Do you still write for GameFAQs every once in a while?
No,
just get an entry or two in there.
It's funny, man. I wrote right before I got hired at IGN, because I was a freelancer and an intern for 5 years at IGN before I got hired, from 2002 to 2007. And I was an intern in 2003 and 2004, the summers of those. And I would still write on GameFAQs every once in a while. And right before I got hired, Mark Ryan Salee offered me my job in the spring of 2007. I wrote my last FAQ, which was the Super Mario 3 whistle location FAQ. So if people go look at my stuff, like, there is something from a little more recently than my high school years, but that's the last time I ever wrote one.
That's a good one. That is one of my favorites that you did.
Thank you. It's funny, man. Like, I love when people, it actually most recently happened. Onimusha 2 is being re-released, and which I love. That came out right when I was beginning college. And Onimusha 1 was one of the first, as I'm sure you remember, one of the first PS2 games of note. And I was a senior in high school, and I wrote a guide for it. And because Onimusha 2 is in the zeitgeist right now, people have been saying, like, I randomly found your old Onimusha guide, I've been using it, or I didn't realize you wrote it until I got to the end and it was about the author part. So these things are still 25, 26 years later, still circulating, which is dope. I love that. And I would not be here without those FAQs. So.
My claim to fame was Dark Souls. Dark Souls came out. We got a little bit early, and I figured out there was this trick with the character named Ceaseless Discharge. And if you hit its hand, it would fall into the pit and die instantly. And it turned out to be like the strat. And that was my first video to sort of go viral. And I would have friends who I went to grade school with call me up and be like, "Is this you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that was me." That is so crazy.
Was that an IGN or Screw Attack?
That was IGN.
IGN.
That was IGN. At Screw Attack, I mainly did the news show. and I did reviews and video game vaults. At that time, that was when, and we did the podcast. We did Side Scrollers way back then when it was, just me, Jose.
So wait, Side Scrollers is an old property? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Side Scrollers was what we did at Screw Attack back in the day, and it was like myself, Jose Mejia, Chad James was on there regularly. Chad James runs Death Battle now, and Craig was a host. Corey would be on there, Ben Singer, the whole crew, because we were a really, really tight-knit group back then, and then we kind of all splintered off afterwards and did our own thing. But yeah, that's where Side Scrollers came from.
I didn't even know that. Yeah, because I love that name. I think that's such a great name for a show, personally.
Yeah, all that branding lost to time, except for Side Scrollers. Craig started doing Side Scrollers again, but it's much different now than I think it was when we did it back in the day.
No, that's why I trademark everything, because it's like sacred. I couldn't believe I could trademark sacred symbols, but I did. Because people are like, "Oh, that term is so fanboyish," and I'm like, "Dude, it's a term that PlayStation itself used for many years." And if you Google around the term sacred symbols and then set your Google search terms to 2017 or before, so before we started the show, you'll see. So when I started it, I was like, I think we'll be able to do it, but I don't think we'll be able to trademark it. And then it got through. So,
nice.
just to solidify it for future use, as it were.
Now they trademark everything.
Yeah, exactly. And so do I. So as I said, every show we do is trademarked except for defining Duke, because Duke University was going to go after us if we did it.
So, speaking of sacred symbols, though, I kind of want to go through some of the roster who I'm most familiar with from Last Stand Media. And correct me if I'm wrong, but was Chris the first person to join and do a show with you, or was there?
No, technically Dagan, my brother, was the first, because we did. So the first podcast we did was Fireside Chats, which is defunct now, but that's what I had you on back in the day, I believe.
Yeah.
Right? Or
you had like all the IGN peeps on that, and I remember
because what I did in the fall of 2017, I went to back to San Francisco. I haven't been there since, actually, and I rented a hotel room, and I in a nice hotel, and I just had people come over and record a bunch of shows with me, which was really fun. McCaffrey was there, Damon was there, a bunch of people. So my brother Dagan, the second podcast we did was Knockback, which is, when does this go live? This show?
It'll go live this weekend, and then for everybody the week following.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're gonna bring Knockback back, but we put it back on the shelf last year because it's a very intensive show to prepare for it, and it is our least trafficked show, but it was like my favorite to do, which is just Dagan, my brother, and I getting together and watching or playing something old and just reminiscing about it and talking about it, which is fun. So he was technically the first person I did a regular podcast with. And then we started Sacred in July of 2018, and that's when I found Chris. And so, yeah, he was in there. And at that point, Dustin wasn't yet with us. I was editing all the shows myself and doing all that, and then Dustin joined as an editor, and everything grew from there. Then I got Cog and Maddie, and now and then I poached Brad from Easy Allies. Suckers.
Cog and
I still can't believe I got Brad. Like, Brad Ellis is amazing. I cannot even believe they let him go, but I'm like, I'll take him.
Yeah, Cog and I got pizza at a wedding during a wedding in San Francisco for another friend of ours. So that was nice. Cog and I are good friends, and we're Xbox peeps. I think your audience, like your fans, mostly lean more PlayStation, and I lean more Xbox. It's why I had you on the show during the FTC thing, because I like bringing people on who have a much different perspective than I do, because we can have a dialogue about why we think what we do without being adversarial. And that's one thing I always really appreciated about you and your content. It's not about shutting the other person down. It's about trying to understand an alternative view. And
I agree. Yeah.
With all my show programming, like even when I was at IGN Fireteam Chat, I wanted people who were playing on the other platform. I wanted people who were playing a different character. And then we could talk about the nuance of what Bungie is. And we all had very different perspectives. And I would bring on guests, like Andrea Renee would come on, and Paolo would come on. I remember we had Cog on, I think, and Paris, and just tons of friends of the Fireteam Chat show, just for that exact reason. And that's one thing I do like about your shows. You all kind of hit a different niche, and you all bring something to the table, so to speak. Except for Dustin, who joined in 2009. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Dustin.
What's the story with Dustin? So he was an editor, right?
Yeah, he was our editor, and then like an associate producer, and then he basically runs the company in a technical way. I run the company like in terms of the clerical, business administration, but he's the one that edits everything, uploads everything, deals with people. And his job is a lot wider than just the shows. Like we do physical merchandise, which he kind of leads up along with my wife. We publish our own games because I co-own a developer. So I physically publish games. Lilymo, right? And my kitchen is full of the next game, like boxes and boxes of 2,000 copies of the next game that we're doing. And so it's like a very weird operation that we have going on. We did live shows. We're not doing any live shows this year, but we've done 5 live shows. So yeah, he's in charge of a lot of different stuff, but he's great. He's a dynamo. Yeah, he obviously had a really horrible tragedy last year.
Yeah.
And we really missed him. But I told him it was difficult to not have him around because everything really does hinge on him. But I told him he can come back whenever he wanted, and he came back when he did. So I'm very grateful for him, and I'm grateful for the whole team. Cog's been great. Cog is technically not the original Duke co-host. ACG was, but he left pretty early, and so Cog feels like we've always been with Cog. Maddie, I've known for a long time. Great talent, hard worker, industrious, honest, decent, really good dude. Like I said, Brad is doing excellent work. I think Summon Sign is so good. That's our newest gaming podcast, although it's over a year old now. So yeah, we've coalesced around an interesting team of people. And really, I just wanted to do things by myself. So it's funny that it turned into this ultimately, but it was inevitable, I guess.
You brought up your wife. Micah she's an on-air talent, your wife, and also an amazing coordinator. She had to put up with me for months of us trying to figure out how my schedule could work with yours and then dealing with tech. And she was great the whole time. So people don't necessarily see that part of it, but she did an amazing job. I thought for sure she would have told me off by now.
No, she's great, dude. It's vital to have. I used to do all the coordination myself, and the company does extremely well. So like, I didn't want, I'm a pretty traditional person. It's like, you can do whatever you want, but you don't have to work. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to. You can just hang out around the house and take care of things here. But she wanted to, and I wanted her to be involved. And I also think it's important to have like your own independent source of income and your own kind of ability to do what you want to do. So she wanted to get involved in that way, and she's done a really good job because I fucking hated scheduling things. It was the worst thing ever. And then she ended up taking over we do an in-house merch operation. Like we all of our shirts, our sweatshirts and stuff, we buy everything in bulk and sell them ourselves. So she goes back and forth to the post office many times a week, and she's great. I mean, and she's a huge nerd. She's a huge Xbox fan, actually. So she's a fan of yours. She's very good about not letting that come through to people because I think it's embarrassing to her, but she really likes you, before I ever knew her. Oh. So I think she was very happy to deal with you.
Well, great. That makes me very happy to hear. She took on the role at your company, though, around 2021. Am I right?
Yeah,
How did that happen? Like, how did that all come about?
We met. She was actually on Sacred Symbols Plus. I left California and lived with my mom for 5 months while I was waiting for my house, which I'm in now, to be done. At that point, I had interviewed her very late, like when I was getting ready to move in here, and we just kind of became friendly. And then,
wait.
Yeah.
So you interviewed her to work with last there?
No, I interviewed her. So actually, I interviewed her as part of being a black woman in the game space.
Oh, actually. Okay. So why do you want to go on a date with me?
Yeah. Well, that was what was so funny was that it was during the George Floyd summer of riots kind of thing.
Yeah.
Tensions were very high. I said something that she didn't like. And so she wanted to come on the show. I don't remember even what it was. People can go back and listen, to be honest.
Oh, I bet you've said plenty of things people don't like.
Oh, yeah. Well,
that's
true. But about like the black experience or something. So it's what you were saying earlier. Like
she put you in your place.
Well, right. But I also like to have those conversations. It's like, if you have a problem with something I say, then come and be on the show. Most people will never do that because I would eviscerate them, frankly. But it's like, but that wasn't really where we were in the space. I wanted to hear her out and all that. And we ended up it was a great conversation, and we ended up becoming friends. And then 6 months later, we really just started dating, and she moved down here. She lived in Massachusetts. She worked at UMass, and her family's all in Massachusetts. And so she moved down here in 2021, and that's kind of how we ended up kind of being more professionally intertwined. And then I asked her to marry me, and then we got married and all the rest. So yeah, she's awesome. And she's 10 years younger than me, so it's like she's a little bit more youthful, which is good because I'm getting old and haggard, and it's good to have a little bit of that spirit. And she's a huge fucking nerd. I don't know about you and like your wife and your previous relationships, but I always sought out people that were very different than me. I always thought that that's what I wanted, and that was what was vital. Opposites attract, like the old idiom, right? And she's not opposite of me at all. We always say that we share we always say we share one single brain cell. And she's a huge gamer, a huge nerd, loves to read, loves to play, loves the dogs, loves all the, and so we're very simpatico. It's a really wonderful relationship. I'm very like it's so right. I didn't know how wrong everything was until I met her. So it's very good.
You know, no matter if you end up dating somebody similar to you or different than you, when you know, it's pretty clear, you know. And I've heard you talk about how before you met your wife, you were like thinking, I knew this wasn't quite right, but you had to go through that journey to end up eventually meeting your wife and marrying her. How did you propose?
We went to, I always bring up this place because we love going there, and we live south of Richmond in Virginia, and there's Richmond was destroyed during the Civil War. So like after the Civil War, because that was the capital of the Confederacy, they started building a lot of beautiful buildings. And one of them was the Jefferson, which is like a really beautiful Victorian era hotel that we go to a few times a year. It's like very expensive. You wear suits and nice dresses. And so I asked her to marry me there. And we go there for her birthday every year. We go there for our anniversary now. So yeah, that's how it happened. And I think actually I asked her to marry me, and it's not like a sexual thing because we were in bed. We were just laying. We got to the hotel and we were laying in bed, and I just like popped it up, and that's how we did it. Yeah. So.
Did she cry?
She did, yeah. But also, I will say, like, it wasn't quite. I was saying this recently that like she knew something was going to happen. I don't think she knew when, and we were there ostensibly for her birthday, so she didn't think it was going to happen then. But she helped design, like it's a custom ring, and she helped design it because I was always afraid. It's a lot of money. It's like a lot of money, and I'm like, what if you don't like what? It's like driving a car off the lot. It's this. I can't just bring this thing back. You know, if you don't like it, they're gonna be like, yeah, we'll give you 60% of what you paid for it or whatever, and you could try again. And I'm like, so it's vital that you like this precious gemstone. And so yeah, she was, I think, happy and surprised, and she looked beautiful at the wedding and stuff, and it was awesome.
That's great. Yeah, now that I'm married, I've been married for several years now, and coming up on 6, I want to say.
That's intense.
Yeah, 5 was a big deal, and then this year's 6, and I love hearing stories about how couples met and how they got married and the whole getting married process, because you kind of remember your own memories of getting to go through that and how exciting it is and how special it is in all of our lives to meet that person, you know. So
did you have like a real wedding, or did you guys kind of like do a justice of the peace sort of thing?
We did a very small wedding. We're both not like, we don't like touting that too much. Like, I don't post photos of my kids anymore. And I think I did initially when they're born, and then that's about it.
That's good. Ryan McCaffrey's always been really disciplined about that.
Yeah.
About never talking about his kids.
Yeah. And I'll talk about my kids, but no, the internet doesn't need to know about that part of my life. That's my personal life. And yeah, I don't really talk about it. But we had a small wedding to actually talk about it for a little bit with some close friends. My wife was absolutely gorgeous. It was perfect. It was exactly what we wanted. And I loved it. And I still have it as the wallpaper on my phone, one of the photos from the wedding. So, Sam?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I thought you were getting your phone.
No, I was muting because I was coughing.
Let's get back to defining Duke and Last Stand Media, though, before we wax poetical about our relationship.
Yeah, before we get sentimental.
Yeah. Defining Duke. That was like, what, 2021? Maddie has done an acceptable job with the show. Cog is pretty good, too. What are they going to do now that Xbox is going third party? Are they just going to hang it out?
People ask that a lot. Like, I don't really know. Like, I don't think Defining Duke's going to go anywhere because I think Xbox isn't going to go anywhere for years. So I think that there's still going to be an audience for that. There's going to be a new machine, probably a handheld, like we know. It's probably going to maybe even come out starting. I mean, I read a rumor. I'm not connected in the Xbox world at all, so I don't know what's like real and not. But that Call of Duty might even be being developed next year for the new machine. And I'm like, well, no, I don't think we have to worry about that in the short to midterm. But I've told them behind the scenes, and I've said it publicly, is like, if and when the show doesn't make sense anymore, I hope that they continue to work with me and do something else. Well, I don't know what it will be, but I don't want to lose them. They're awesome. So, and they know that. So, but I'm not worried about that for the time being. Defining Duke has a big audience. We have 4 shows in iTunes top 40. So, so they are doing a great job. But I do think that the audience is going to start to stagnate as things change for Xbox. But I don't think that's happening yet.
Well, they're just going to have to get a PS5 and play all the Microsoft Studios games that are coming
on PS5
I'm
Pro.
being facetious. Like, I know the audience is probably going to get mad. I hope they know I'm joking around. I don't think Xbox is going anywhere either. I think they're making some interesting business decisions. I want to ask you a little bit about where you think PlayStation is going, but I do want to get through one more important addition, and then you can remind me if I forgot anybody. But Gene,
Gene,
around 2022, he's joined for Punching Up. He's a vet in the media space. He's worked at all the big publications. How did that happen? Because I know you had him as a guest at one point, and then he ended up joining the crew.
Yeah, he might even remember better than me, but like we just became friends. Like the thing about Gene, I'm friends with all the people that we work with and I love them all. Gene and I are kind of 2 peas in a pod though, with a lot of different things, pop culture, and like we like weird things. Like we bond over, we love like predator catcher videos and like public freak out videos and like things that we just started talking about and like reminiscing about. And he's just like an old soul. He's great. Like Gene is awesome. And the thing about Gene is that he's like, I mean, they're all ride or die because there's been a social cost to working for Last Stand for all of them, for Cog, for Maddie, getting cut off from people and all the rest. And Gene, I think, paid the largest social price for it. And he's basically given all of those people the finger. And I think that's really, I think what happened is like he saw through the noise and realized like, oh, this person is not who a lot of people say he is. And we became good buddies because of that. He's actually coming to Richmond in a couple of months to hang out with us. He lives in Washington. So yeah, we're really lucky to have him. And he's like a very grounded, legitimate person as far as like his bona fides, his ability to write, his knowledge of games, his depth. Yeah, he's an interesting person. So he's awesome to have along with us too.
This interview is brought to you by people just like you. This first launch on Patreon and to YouTube members, so a big thanks to them for backing. If you would like to do so, you can go to patreon.com/SafeStatePlus or become a member here on YouTube.
Well, we could talk about the ideological nature of just the industry as a whole and how you feel like half the voice isn't represented.
Sure.
Is that accurate?
You want me to pick it up from there?
Yeah.
So I just, it's not that I don't feel that things aren't ideologically represented. It's that I know it's not. Like it's not. All you hear about is pro-labor, but never things that would bring labor into question. You always hear about how the top suits are at fault, but never the people below. There's a lot of like business ideology, capitalist anti-capitalist ideology.
And why do you think people are so defensive when you actually attack those particular topics? I've talked often about how I feel like microtransactions have become way too prevalent and they're just becoming like a band-aid to address this bigger issue, that there's massive bloat in the industry in terms of spending and people are just dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into marketing. And then Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 comes along and does it for 41 million. Like, to make it make sense.
Right, exactly. And of course, Kingdom Come has the advantage of being developed in Eastern Europe and it's cheap.
Yeah.
But the point is that it doesn't have to be the way it is. And I just think my honest answer is that it's a bummer that mainstream media has kind of folded in one specific way, and that I think it has given rise to like grifters and people that really don't understand the industry. Like there are people that talk about games that don't know what they're talking about. And I don't mean from like a play perspective. I mean, they don't know how games are made. They don't understand money. They don't understand capital. They don't understand how studios function. They don't understand the first thing that goes into making a game. They've never seen it. They've never done it. And so I think I think ignorance has kind of prevailed in a lot of different ways, not only ideologically, but just in terms of like the raw making of a video game. And actually, the one of the things that taught me that more than anything was owning a studio, and really the perspective that gave me. We've released 6 games, and that's a lot of learning of things that I didn't know. And by the way, because I used to be embedded at a lot of these studios for sometimes a week or two at a time, so I knew the process. But you don't really know until you do it. So that's another advantage.
Do you feel like people at the big AAA companies are a little bit, they only know that way of making things work? Do you think they've forgotten that there is a purity to creating games where you don't have to do all those things? I feel like sight at a lot of companies has been lost. And it's really weird when I see people at the companies who aren't guilty of some of the like microtransactions and battle passes and, bad ports of games. Like, they're working at companies that are widely celebrated, and they're like, oh yeah, like I don't know how to phrase it, but they talk about how they have to do those things. These other studios have to do these negative things that negatively impact the game and negatively impact the player. They just have to. There's no other solution. That's what we have to do. Well, then the industry is going to collapse.
Yeah, or at least the way we understand it. Like, you and I might have talked about this in the past, but I've always been interested in this idea that like the gaming industry is going to crash again, in quotes, like it did in the early 80s. And I'm like, there's just too much money involved in it now. It's never going to stop. Like, there's always going to be lots of money. It's just that there's going to be lots of losers. Like, as opposed to like back in 83, everyone lost. But this time it's most people are going to lose. And then there's going to be huge winners. Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto, whatever. If you like this monoculture, I think Circana's data recently was like, 10 games on PlayStation 5 are played for 40% of game time. That's horrifying. Like
screen time.
Right. It's like real. That is, so that leaves 60% of your playtime for the other 25,000 games or whatever that are on PS4 and PS5 or like whatever it is. It's really bad. And I think that so there's a have and have not situation and an imbalance. And I think part of me understands why companies chase it, because there are these examples that are quite diverse of how it works. You have Rocket League, you have Fortnite, you have Apex Legends, Minecraft, whatever the case might be. Flight Simulator is like becoming this really quiet, big success. On PC, there's all these random racing games that are like, people are just coming back and playing these things over and over again. And I understand that the companies, especially Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, look at this and say, like, we have all the data. We know exactly what you're playing and how you're doing it. We would be crazy. And this is what I tell my audience on Sacred over and over again, though they scream at me all the time about it, as I'm like, no, Sony should make games as a service. They should invest a lot of money in it. The idea, and I made a video about this recently, was like, not the games as a service meltdown didn't happen because they tried. It happened because they did it wrong. Mm-hmm. They should invest in those things. And the game like Helldivers that they didn't believe in is the game that ended up being the product that floated to the top. But you have to understand that they look at this and they say, we are churning billions of dollars for Fortnite, but we only get 30%. What if we tried to make our own and got all of the money? Mm-hmm. Like, that's a pretty logical thing, but you have to follow through on it properly. And which is, again, why I think having a lot of stakes, or, forks, or irons, to not mix metaphors, in the fire is good. Because a lot of those things are going to
$400 million fire sticks.
Right, exactly. Like Concord obviously was a bad idea. The Bungie acquisition was a disaster. I mean, I said that from the beginning, that the Bungie, when they acquired Bungie, I'm like, I don't know why you did this. I don't know why you spent all this money on this product, this property. Bungie doesn't have what you need. And lo and behold, they ate that. They're eating so much shit on it to begin with. They basically, we talked about this on Sacred, is that like it's questionable to me how long Bungie will really exist, because I think they'll get Marathon out, and I hope it does great. But Sony is clearly pillaging them. Like, I don't know if you saw, like, the lead designer just went to Gorilla.
Yeah.
And like, so like they're just, and they spun off all those people for the Gummy Bears project, and they took a bunch of people into SOE and all these. It's like, or SIE rather. I think that the Bungie acquisition was just such a disaster. They have to get back to brass tacks, and it was what I was talking about with Shuhei Yoshida. Like, mature second party relationships until they make sense to become first party relationships, and then put a ring on it. When the most. They did this with Firewalk. Firewalk and Haven are the two teams they bought without ever working with first, or like just getting their games up, and it's not going so well, is it? So, and obviously Bungie costs more than every PlayStation acquisition ever combined. So
Bungie
it was a lot of
Bungie
money.
was reactionary. It was completely
Definitely.
reactionary to the Bethesda deal. And I would actually say that I think Microsoft and Bethesda had sort of that relationship where they had worked together, they worked together well, and that one made sense.
I think it did too.
Activision, I don't know. I think Activision was Bobby Kotick just wanted to get his golden parachute and jump out of the plane.
That acquisition changed everything for Microsoft. It was a huge. If you care about Xbox, that was a huge mistake. Like, if you don't care about Xbox and you just care about Microsoft gaming or just a person in the industry that wants games, it's great. But that caused the undoing of Xbox. But I think Bethesda.
You really think so?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Well, like, I don't understand how that would be the undoing. I think that during the FTC trial, Satya Nadella even said as much, like he doesn't like content exclusives, and it seemed like they never had the plan of making any of those games exclusive. But how does that equal the undoing of Microsoft?
Because I think when you spend, so you brought up the Bethesda deal, which I agree was actually quite sensible.
Yeah.
And if you go back to like Morrowind and
Oblivion?
I guess if you start with Morrowind. But yeah, and you go up to...
There was the big 360 launch title.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's like, there's always been... Or Fallout 3 DLC only going to Xbox 360 in the beginning, like Operation Anchorage and all that stuff, which I loved. Yep. I played all that stuff on Xbox 360 back in the day. I was writing guides at the time. That relationship had always kind of existed, I agree. And there is a Western role-playing game heritage on Xbox that doesn't or didn't really exist on PS3, I think, or PlayStation generally. I think it exists more now. And so that made sense to me, and that was a cheaper deal, a much cheaper deal. And I think that didn't get the Eye of Sauron kind of focused on them internally. If you look at, and I'm sure you do, you look at it every quarter, I do, is like, I look at the Xbox financials, and usually this was like a rounding error. They didn't care. They didn't say anything about it. It was always at the bottom. Mm. But then I think when you go and spend more than Microsoft's ever spent on an acquisition, which is crazy, by 2 times over, I think, then everyone's going to start paying, like everyone now internally is paying attention to you. And then I think it started to show the creases in the Game Pass model and what they were really going to do and how they were going to approach this. Because I think that the bean counter started realizing like Game Pass is just not happening in the way that we need it to. It's always going to be an interesting niche idea. And I've been very clear, Destin, and you might have seen it as like, I think Game Pass was actually a good idea. I just don't think it panned out in the end. I would have probably
It's a great deal. You get access to lots of games. I do like it. I like the PlayStation Now Plus revamp, actually. I think that is, it's been okay. Like not as good as Game Pass, but it's definitely better than what it was.
And so I think the idea and premise was good because we didn't have any data. We didn't know if it was going to work or not. You look around the landscape and say, like, everyone loves Netflix. Everyone loves Amazon Prime. Mm-hmm. People love Spotify. Why wouldn't you want that with games? But what we didn't realize was, like, actually people don't want that with games because they are, there's going to be a group of maybe 20 million, 30 million people that like it, but that's not going to be enough. And not even anywhere close to it. And they said that in their own numbers. I think by 2027, they needed to be at 100 million subscribers. They're never going to get halfway to that number ever. So I think that the bean counters internally were like, this is a good idea if the growth continued. But since we're plateauing and we've instructed passively anyway our audience not to buy games, and since we know from data release that people on Xbox are simply not buying games to anywhere near the level that they do on PlayStation, Switch, or PC, and I can say that from my own experience too, we sell games there, but not nearly to the level. Because of an expectation of a subscription service, I think they realize like, shit, if we buy Bethesda, put Starfield into Game Pass, that costs us X amount of money. We spent $5 or $6 billion on this operation. We can kind of figure that out. The PC release will be there. This game will burn for a long time. How much did you like? So I think that like the guys that Amy Hood and these people were like, wait, $70 billion, and the game, each Call of Duty game between development and marketing is somewhere in $600, $700, $800 million.
Really?
Yeah, like you can't. We saw the leak. What was it? The information leak that I think 3 years ago, Call of Duty cost $750 million. So you're getting to a position where it's getting maybe close to $1 billion, and that's fine because they make that money back. But I think they were looking at it and saying like, so we're going to put it into a subscription model. This doesn't work. Like, and then I think they started saying like, wait, if this isn't working if this is never going to happen with Call of Duty, then why are we doing this with Starfield? Why are we doing this with all of our other games? We need to sell them.
Jones.
We need to sell them. And I think, I do believe that it was the beginning of the undoing because I think it brought a lot of financial attention, reasonably so, to the operation. And everyone realized that what seemed like a good idea wasn't panning out. And I think that that's fairly obvious.
But now you're able to, on PlayStation, buy those games at full price for $70. And I do think the revenue that's being generated, which is substantial from the PlayStation audience, they're like some of the top downloaded and paid games. They'll just sit up there for like a month or two on the PlayStation side. They're now helping finance new Xbox Game Studios games. So I think the Xbox as we knew it, making exclusives, never releasing anything on other platforms, I do think that aspect of it has changed, but I don't think it's been overall damaging. I don't see how that particular deal has been damaging. I think there's other problems with the Microsoft ecosystem, like the fact that their console is, I believe, looking at the numbers, their console seems to be selling less than the previous generation, and it's much better hardware. I think that they haven't quite broken through into cloud. They're probably the front runner, but they haven't broken into the cloud as much as they need to. And obviously their Game Pass numbers aren't going up like they need to. So I think all up, I don't think it's the fact that they bought Activision. I think they already had the problems. They made these purchases thinking that it would help course correct, and it didn't pan out.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. Like, I think you and I will have to agree to disagree on that sense, and just that I think it exacerbated the issue so severely because they one of the things that I think people weren't just thinking about with this Activision deal is like, dude, you're literally absorbing all of it. Like, now you're on the hook. And I'm talking about Microsoft at this point, right? It's like all of this production. I think they got into the weeds and were like, Jesus Christ, like, what did we buy? Not from a bad perspective because it's good, but it's like, this is going to require a lot of backing. And I just think when it was clear that Call of Duty wasn't really moving Game Pass itself this past fall and into this year, I was like, it's never going to happen. I mean, now you know it's never going to happen. And in fact, you might have preferred the people that came onto Game Pass for 1 or 2 months to have just bought it. That was like the whole thing, is like they would have just bought it. And I think they realized that they're kind of hurting themselves because games aren't. We didn't know when they started up Game Pass what we know now, which is that, yeah, people don't really like this. It's like, it's cool, it's value driven, but people like choice. They also like marinating on games for a long time. People play games differently. And I think that, so I think they have the best of both worlds now because they can subsidize, and I use that word intentionally, subsidize Game Pass with PlayStation and Switch sales.
And early access. They've been doing early access a few days ahead of time.
Forza is going up early on PlayStation. Yeah. It's so funny, like, and Forza is going to kill on PS5.
Horizon, yeah.
Horizon 5, right. And
the meme online is finally PlayStation has a good Horizon game.
Yes.
But I think Horizon's a good game. But it's a funny meme.
I personally love
It's
Horizon.
A funny meme. Yeah.
But I know I'm not in the minority. I mean, Horizon has sold like 35 million copies or something. But it's the two of them. But yeah, so it's so funny that Forza Horizon 2 or Forza Horizon 5 came out in 2021. And they're charging for early access on PS5, and I'm like, yeah, fucking get them. You know, like I would make it as painful as possible because the novelty is there. It's like when Gears comes later this year. It's like we're talking about millions of copies of that game being sold on PS5. The novelty is going to be so heavy when Halo comes. Oh my God, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be absolutely nuts.
And I think they are coming. I think people need to like get mentally prepared or whatever you need to do. Phil Spencer's been flagging that this is coming since Indiana Jones. Once Indiana Jones went, I'm like, it's done. Like, and anybody who didn't see that, I'm like, you better buckle up. Like, this is what it's going to be going forward.
I would say, Destin, and I wonder how you feel about this, is like, my read is that there are no more Xbox exclusives at all. Like, I don't think that it's going to be. I think ultimately, there's a line of delineation. I keep saying I would love Rare Replay on PS5. I don't think they're going to go back and do that. Like, I think there's just things that are old enough.
The Halo, whatever, Master Chief Collection. I can see.
Like things that are going to be relevant moving forward. Big franchises. Like in other words, we're not going to get all the old Forza games. I think the next Forza mainline Turn 10 game is definitely coming to PlayStation. Like, and so I think that moving forward, like Avowed's going to come to PlayStation. Hellblade's coming to PlayStation. Fable will probably come to PlayStation Day and Date, I would imagine.
Hellblade didn't go to PlayStation?
What'd you say?
Hellblade didn't go to PlayStation? I already thought it went because the first one did.
The first one was a timed exclusive. I never played either of them. I don't give a shit about Hellblade, but I know a lot of people are going. The funny thing is I don't really give a shit about a lot of these games. Gears is where Pentiment got me, because Pentiment's fucking dope. I was going to say,
Pentiment, I've heard you talk about that.
Love it. So what a game, dude. And I bought Hi-Fi Rush, but I haven't played it yet. But the next game up for me will be Indiana Jones, I guess, and then Doom, which doesn't really count. That was always going to come to PlayStation. But things are getting a little more juicy and interesting when you get to Gears. I love the Gears trilogy on 360.
Oh yeah.
And Halo, I own Halo Master Chief Collection on Xbox, but I'll buy it obviously on PS5. So things are getting a little more juicy, but it's like I think people should my personal read is like anything Xbox announces is not exclusive anymore in my opinion. At least not permanently. I think the only reason I think Avowed, for instance, is not on PS5 is because they were simply not able to do it concurrently.
I think Avowed's going to PS5.
That game's not coming over. Now, I don't want to play it. I think it looks like fantasy tripe personally, but I know a lot of people really enjoy it. Chris was really into it, actually.
It's fun. It's like fine. It's not like the best game you've ever played. It's like a 7 or an 8 on the 10-point scale. You know, it's one of those just, it's fine. It's like a okay RPG, but I played about 10 hours of it. I didn't finish it or anything, but I feel like a lot of the quests don't really pay off. Like you kind of get your little payoff once you do it, and then that's it. Some of them pay off in the end game, I've heard, but not all of them.
It's a tad. I've read some stuff too about it that's interesting. That you really need to know Pillars of Eternity, I guess, to get the most out of it. Which I don't. I'm not. I was never going to play that game anyway. The big one I'm interested in that I really want to see how it does when it comes over is Starfield. Because I think that
it'll be the best game ever made after it comes to PlayStation.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Actually, was that I think that's
all the PlayStation fans.
Well, I think that's the one example. Like, I'm kind of a Bethesda fan sometimes. So, like, I loved Fallout 3. Fallout 3 was a really seminal game for me because as a PlayStation and Nintendo person, I had never really played anything like that before. And I loved it. And I was just absolutely in love with it. Plus, I'm in it.
Is that actually you, or is that just a coincidence?
No, that's a coincidence. I've told the story before, but it's so old now that a lot of people probably haven't heard it, is that when I went to E3 that year, so that came out in 2008. So I was at E3 in that summer of 2008. And I went to Bethesda's booth with a bunch of people at IGN. You know, you remember, like, people on the last day will make appointments to be like, we have a group appointment, go play Nintendo games if you want, or go do whatever behind the scenes. So we did that at Bethesda Game Studios, and they had a big Fallout 3 thing there, and I had never met Todd Howard before, and I came in, and he stopped me, and he's like, is this a joke? Like, with my name tag on? And he's like, did someone put you up to this? And I'm like, no, it's my name. And they're like, you're in the game. And actually, I don't know if you remember that demo that year, but
I played it, yeah.
Yeah, they literally just started you from outside the vault. So you just got to, so you could run into Colin Moriarty in the game, and people were there, and they were like, there's a character named Colin Moriarty there. And so I was like, no, that's just a funny coincidence. So a weird one, nonetheless.
I think I played it years later, and I might have texted you or Slacked you or whatever and been like, hey, what is this? Like, is this a reference? And
But I bring that up only because, like, with Starfield, it's like, so I liked Fallout 3. I loved Fallout 3. I loved New Vegas as well, Obsidian. But I didn't like Fallout 4. I tried it twice. I wasn't into it. And I really didn't like Skyrim either. And I would like to get back to Skyrim. So I actually don't know if I don't even know if I'll even try Starfield when it comes to PlayStation. I probably won't.
New Vegas or Fallout 3?
I like New Vegas more just because I think it's, I think it's a little more.
I'm the only Fallout 3. I'm the only 3 guy.
Well, I think New Vegas is interesting because it's so, what I love about it, and it's been a long time since I played it, but it's morally gray. Like, one of the things that's fun about it is it's a little subversive in that you think you're doing things that you're not, or you're making choices that are actually counterproductive to what you're trying to do. And I like when games occasionally frustrate you like that, where it's like, that's not what I really intended, but that's the outcome of my actions, as opposed to Fallout 3 being reading a little more linearly in terms of good and bad and what you're going to do. But again, Fallout 3 was so seminal that I think it's a more powerful game, but I don't think it's the better game. No.
It was really special. We should probably rein it in a little bit. I actually meant to talk to you more about Last Stand Media.
Sure. Yeah. I have all the time in the world, so whatever you want to do.
What's the biggest lesson you learned since starting Last Stand Media?
God, I think a major lesson is, like, trust and consistency and decency really matter in running a business. Some people are surprised by this, but I bring this up every once in a while. Like, no one with Last Stand has any sort of, like, written contract, like, none at all. It's all handshake deals, and this has been going on for years about, like, what you're going to get paid, what I expect of you, what you're going to do, when you're scheduled to do something, like all of this. There's no document saying like, do this or you're fired, or do this or you're fined, or we dock you, or whatever. You're in probation. We just have handshake deals and everyone does what they're supposed to do. And I really have realized that if you just, this only works in small operations. IGN wouldn't be able to operate like this or whatever. But if you just kind of treat people with respect, pay them on time, give them the benefit of the doubt, let them lean into the things that they love and are good at. Don't have expectations about, a big thing with us is like, no one should play anything. That's a big thing with us. It's like, play whatever you want, do whatever you want. All I want are the shows on time at a high quality. I don't care if you work on them for 5 or 50 hours, as long as it's good and it's done. And I encourage my people to work less. As Dustin knows, because a few people are full-time. Like Dustin's a full-time employee, Mike is a full-time employee. I believe in the 32-hour work week, like the 4-day work week. I think that that's really a laudable goal, especially in times of mechanizing everything like we're doing now. And we don't have hour counts like that, but it's part of the philosophy of like, work hard, do what you have to do, but don't feel like you need to be clicking at a computer to justify your time if you have nothing to do. Don't feel like you need to pretend anything. And I'm always going to pay you on time. I pay big bonuses to everyone at the end of the year to show them appreciation. And I think that that's what I've learned is just really keeping it buttoned up with the respect and the mutual respect of everyone working on it. And you can have a really easy relationship with people. It's the reason why I think we've really only lost ACG left, but he wasn't on. I mean, he could speak for himself, but I don't think it's that he was unhappy with us. I think he was just like, I kind of need time to do my own thing. And we respected that. And then we had to let Ben go last year, who was our associate producer, simply because we had nothing for him to do. I mean, it was like, I told him, I was like, dude, it sucks. Like we're a low 7-figure company. If we were like a low 8-figure company, I would give you a window facing job for the rest of your life. Because I treat my friends like that, but I'm like, unfortunately, I can't allocate capital like that. You're a wonderful person, but we're just out of tasks for you. So yeah, I think that's the thing I learned is like treating people with respect. And all these years later, everyone stayed with us. Like everyone's still here. And I think that's a testament to the way we do things, in my opinion. I don't know if that reads to you, but
no, it does make sense. And I think about what you said about when you hire people, just figure out what their interests are and align their tasks with their interests, like organically. I think that's a really smart thing to do as a leader. And when I hired people, like I would be like, what are you into? Fighting games. Okay, work on fighting games.
Right.
You know, like that, you know, that topic, that's what you should work on. Like, do you know Madden? No, then let's not do that. You know, it's that simple. It's like, it's not rocket science with this stuff. And I do think when I see people online trying to do coverage of a genre like sports or something, and they just have, like, if I covered a sports game, it would be terrible. I barely know football. I know basketball and football and everything like that. So unless I'm doing it from the perspective of, hey, I'm not a super fan of all these sports, I don't know who any of these players are, like, here's my take on it. Like, I think it's less valuable than the people who want to play Madden and they just want to know the stat changes or whatever the minutia is that has been adjusted in a game like that. So.
Yeah, I agree. Like, people read through disingenuousness and fakeness very quickly. And it's one of the reasons why I love achievements and trophies is because like people can't hide anymore about like what they're playing and what they're not, and like what they're interested in and how much they play and all of the rest.
Do people actually do that? Because like my stuff's privated. Sometimes I turn it public. It's just oftentimes you get an embargo and they're like, you have to set all your stuff private.
Oh yeah,
and I just leave it private.
Yeah.
But like, I don't care. You can go look at my trophies. Like I finished Gran Turismo 7. Like go look at my trophies. Go see how much I played Starfield.
I think it's vital,
why would I lie? Why the hell would I lie?
People do lie though.
Why?
I think it's like a good way. The answer is I don't know why people would lie. But what I love about it is that like when you see it on Twitter every once in a while, it's like someone will be talking a ton of shit about a game and then someone will be like, well, why have you 20 of the 1,000 achievement points for the game if you're like such a fan of it? I think that's like actually really awesome. It's because like there's nowhere to hide anymore. That's why I encourage people all the time, like, look at my trophies. You're going to find very few people that play more games than me. Go ahead, look, like you verify it for yourself. So I think that's a good barometer of things, but it goes into like leaning into what's authentic and what's not authentic is things that should be kind of stayed away from. It's why at IGN, I really loved covering PlayStation because the powers that be there were like, this is what you know and this is what you're good at. And it's the reason why IGN PlayStation was such a dominant part of the site for so many years, and why they hired someone like Ryan McCaffrey to bring balance to the site, which was exactly the reason why he was brought on, and he was awesome. Finally, we had like a foil. Greg and I had like a foil in someone that we could actually publish as much as we were and do as much as we were. So it's good to find people that fit into these different verticals. And the worst thing, in my opinion, of working at IGN, although this only happened in hindsight, was just and working in the industry generally, really, is just being under embargo pressure all the time. Got to move on from game A to game B to game C. The embargo's this, the embargo that. I wanted to free myself of that grind. It's one of the reasons why. So it's funny, man. It's like quitting a drug, right? When I first started not getting games early, so this was in like 2019.
Yeah,
it was hard at first because I was really used to being like, oh, I got to know and I got to get, and then you kind of just like wean yourself off of it, and then you realize how much it was fucking your life up because you'd get this game. And you'd be like, yeah, 5 days before the embargo. It's like, great, I got to play this game completely unnaturally. It's like when we were working at IGN, I used to disappear for days at a time because I was like, I got to just play this fucking game. I have no time to do anything else. So I'll be at home for a while. And getting away from that, I think, has made the content freer. We're not timely in any respect, but there's like some authenticity to being like, no, we got it when you did. And we're kind of still working our way through it just like you are. And I think that that's kind of been good for people. It gives us like a second wind after the embargo passes for our opinions to kind of exist out there. So I think it's good. It's kind of like what Angry Joe did for many years.
Oh, yeah. I remember sitting at my desk, we would have an early game and I'd be playing like Borderlands 2 or something. And every 10 minutes, someone would come over. How's the game? What do you think about it? Like, let's talk about it for 10 minutes. And I wouldn't get anything done. So eventually at some point, I think Mark Ryan Sally or Caleb was my boss at that point. I'm like, I got to work at home. Like, I can't get anything done. Like, I'm never going to finish this game on time. We have Batman or whatever for like a week. Just let me go capture everything at home and do all my editing at home.
Yeah, I used to.
And I would knock it out of the park. Or I would stay super late. Yeah.
I rarely played at my desk. I would always have my PS3 on or my PS4 on because I was always
You would go in the bay, right?
Yeah, I'd go to a bay to play because I try to capture, like, be judicious with time, like capture what you need to capture. Sometimes I like to capture after I beat a game because it's like, well, you want to have good gameplay.
Yeah.
Like, you know what you're doing and look kind of better than maybe you are at the game. And so I try to do that as well. But it's funny to think back at those days because there was something so fun about it, but there was something so stressful about it. And it really horrifyingly stressful because even if you missed an embargo, like sometimes it was a big deal, but oftentimes you'd be like, oh, it's okay. But you know, people were disappointed in you because like everyone else was done. It was a rarity that would happen, but
and you want to hit the embargo. That's the finish line. So,
and then of course that's in the terror of the embargo of not knowing if you gave the review score that's 4 points higher than everyone else. I always talk about the only game I ever gave a 10 was The Last of Us, and I remember publishing that and being like, I don't know, man. Like, I think, like, what if everyone gave this game a 7, but then it ended up being kind of the consensus score. So that was good.
Yeah, I forgot about that because I always made it a point whenever I would write anything, I wouldn't watch anything else. And then I would write it, I would do the edit, make sure everything's good. And then sometimes I would fact check my script. But beyond that, I would basically have everything locked and then put it out there. But yeah, man, that whole embargo thing, it is tricky because you don't want to miss it. I don't think I ever missed an embargo, except for with Destiny, because it would be like you would do the review in progress for Destiny, and then the raid would come out like a week later, so you wouldn't put the score on it until you got the raid.
Right. Yeah, I never missed any for like important games, but there were definitely things that we didn't get through until like a week later. Famously, we didn't review Demon's Souls until like a month after it came out.
Great game. Such a great game. I remember I was at ScrewAttack still when Demon's Souls came out, and I'm playing it and I'm like, this game's like really special. Like, this is something on like anything I'd ever played. And yeah, I think we just had buy it, rent it, or F it as a scale back then.
It's funny.
And it was a clear buy. Yeah.
The Soulsborne game, like Souls-like games are just too hard for me. I'm not into them, but that was a game that we didn't understand at the site for sure. And it was funny to hear Shuhei on my recent conversation with him talk about that, about how he kind of inherited, because I asked him, I'm like, why didn't you guys publish it? And he's like, I inherited that situation. The die was already cast, but it was interesting for him to say like, but that kind of cost us Dark Souls. And there's a whole different timeline where those games were PlayStation games. Like, it's interesting to think about these fumbled things because people even internally often don't understand the product they have. It's the same thing with The Last of Us we were bringing up. Like no one understood how good Factions was. I can tell you that with complete certainty. Like there are some things that they just don't understand about their own products, which is so fun.
I think the biggest mistake PlayStation has had is just canning the multiplayer Last of Us game.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge mistake. I think they should have given it to Firewalk or Bungie or anybody else. What is fair games? Who cares? You have this massive IP. You have a thing that people who played it leaked said was good. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I know people who played it and it was good from what they say, but it's very good actually. But yeah, I think part of that was like Naughty Dog is the crown jewel of their studios and I think has complete control over what happens with their stuff.
Yeah. Now Druckmann's like, yeah, that's a wrap. Sorry, guys. No more Last of Us.
I do think that there was a major, and I don't know who the buck stops, I guess, with maybe Herman in this case, is like, it does seem strange that you would let a team work for years, for hundreds of people, on a game that you spent a lot of money on. And then late in the game, everyone's like, but what do we do after it comes out? Like, that was the first time it ever, like you can imagine like a really quiet workspace of cubicles where everyone's quietly clicking away and then someone stands up and is like, well, wait, guys, wait a minute. Like, and to me, that is so strange. And what I'm referring to, of course, is Naughty Dog saying like, should we release this game, it will subsume us. And we don't want that to happen to us. And I'm like, but how did you not know that was going to, like, that was necessary? And what it seems like is that Bungie came in and was like, you guys don't have a post-game plan for this that's anywhere near sufficient, and this is what it's going to look like. But I think looking back on that, I'm like, I don't really give a shit what Bungie thinks, to be perfectly honest, about anything. So it's really a shame that kind of helped kill it, but it's very weird. But I think Sony is happy to write down these costs on their taxes, make their taxable income lower. It's why they canceled all these other games too, and so we'll see.
Here's the crazy thing. You said they brought in Bungie to do all this advice and stuff. They purchased a company formed of a lot of former Bungie people who made the Halo games and everything. And they're like, yeah, make a totally new game. That game bombs. They fire all the people. They close the studio. And then they're like, yeah, and you know what? Let's get rid of Last of Us 2 while we're at it. I just like, what? But the Horizon multiplayer game's still coming. I almost feel like Herman is a little too... in love with the Horizon franchise because, it's his baby. It makes sense. But it's just like you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater at some point.
It definitely reads like Guerrilla gets preferential treatment with Horizon. Although I think Horizon 2 is sick. The second Horizon game is arguably the most beautiful video game ever.
Yeah.
And I like Aloy personally. I love the story, especially the second one. So I'm not speaking as a hater, but I understand a lot of people don't like it. But it does seem like, because there's the multiplayer game, there's the MMO, there was the VR game, there's going to be a third game in the core series, there's the Lego game. It's like, yeah, it's enough. Even for me, I don't want that much of anything. Like even the things I love more than anything, it's like, no. What makes The Last of Us so exciting to me, although it looks like maybe we won't get a third game, although I think that we will, is that there's so much time. It's like, yeah, anything can come back after this much time. So, yeah, Horizon's a little bit beaten to the ground. And I do think that comes, maybe subconsciously or not, from Herman. I think it's fairly obvious, right? But
it seems like it.
Yeah.
Do you think people just don't realize how impactful Shuhei was? Because I listened to your interview, I'm like, you don't understand how much of a positive impact he had on this company, because a lot of people just seem nonchalant about it. I'm like, no, he had his hands in the PlayStation 4. He had his hands in a lot of games where he wasn't sure about them, and maybe that feedback ended up making them better. They ended up coming out, didn't they? And he basically single-handedly saved the indie scene. There was a lot of criticism from the indie audience about how PlayStation was supporting the indie developers, and you know what? He fixed it. So I think he deserves a tremendous amount of respect, and I think he's been by some undervalued. Like, I don't think people understand how positive an impact he had.
Well, I think he had like what's so important with producers, which is taste. And I think that his taste helped dictate the terms of PlayStation's the arms race that developed around what PlayStation was doing for a long time within the industry. So I think he didn't really get into it, and I'm not going to press him privately or publicly. It's really his own personal thing, but it's like, we still haven't gotten into the why. Like, why did they let you go? It doesn't make any sense. And I think it probably has to do with out of control costs. Like, I think that's probably something with it. It's like, we are spending so much money on these games.
And Jim Ryan just wanted to retire. There was nothing else happened there.
It's just, well, originally I was like, before it became, based on the information we knew at the time of Jim Ryan's retirement, I'm like, yeah, maybe he does just want to get out of here because he did pretty well, right? But then it became clear that it wasn't so good, actually, because we were looking at only things through the lens of PS5 sales and him kind of helping lubricate the wheels for that. But I think with Shuhei,
he did great. Jim Ryan did great until he didn't. And it was like the last 2 years, it just went off a cliff.
Yeah, bad acquisitions and bad choices and like, so whatever. But I think Shuhei's taste, I think, helped dictate the terms of PlayStation. And I think that is, some people just have good taste and some people just know how things go. And I love listening to him talk about how he joined Sony in the 80s and then joins as the first non-technical hire for the PlayStation brand, and how he really didn't know anything. And he just but he was a player of games and he understood what was good and what wasn't. And I think that's hard to find. Like, it's hard to find that and trust someone with billions of dollars of production money to kind of dictate the terms of where those things are going to go. But you can see, and this is what I was talking, I saw a huge smile on his face when I said this, because he's like, and I think he said something like, you get it. Because I was like, Demon's Souls remake was yours. Returnal was yours. Spider-Man 2 was yours. Ratchet, the last Ratchet game was yours. Horizon 2 was yours. Like, the fruits are all of those after you left first party are all the things that you greenlit. And that's why I appreciated him saying, like, I also greenlit Concord. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Because a lot of people were like, Concord didn't even start development until 2021. I'm like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So I think that now that you see nothing coming out, now that you see very few games of note coming, it's like, well, now you see maybe what Shuhei Yoshida meant. And that's why I really want to, hopefully, it's not going to be me, but like, we got to get, I hope, an answer one day of like, what was the thought process behind you relinquishing that person, and not only doing that, but removing all of the personality from PlayStation, as far as like, that's when they stopped talking. Shuhei Yoshida disappeared, Adam Boyes disappeared, Gio Corsi disappeared. Like, everyone was gone. People stopped tweeting. You didn't see Corey as much anymore. You didn't see Neil as much anymore. Now Neil and Corey only talk to like Variety and GQ. At some point,
where the real gamers play.
Right, like, it's like there were decisions that were made that I think were mysterious to me, but that I'll never really know, and that are a real journalist would be able to ask them. But I'm not a real journalist, and I don't want to get that personal with someone who I consider a friend. So it's like, it's tough to get any further answers. I was so thrilled with how open he was on my interview with him, though. It was great.
Yeah, your interview was wonderful. I really liked it.
Thank
you. What does the next decade hold for Last Stand Media?
Last Stand.
10 years.
10 years.
Looking forward.
I don't know, really. Like, I say this a lot, and it's kind of dour, but it's like, I do believe that nothing really lasts forever, that like, you have to prepare probably for some sort of decline and some sort of like obsolescence as
you'll close. Got it.
Right. Like, well, it's like, I want to do this for as long as the audience will have me, but I have no expectation, and I'm always going to work really hard. I think we do good, consistent work. I think at time, and I think people really connect with it. But I think that I always try to tell, like, when we're feeling a certain way about this or that, the other thing, I'm like, remember, like, when we do Sacred Symbols, it's like sitting in the middle of, the Cowboys AT&T Stadium in Dallas, and it's full, like, sold out. That's the people listening to the show every week. That's the amount of people listening to it. And it's like, that's amazing. But no matter how hard we work, I think people might not necessarily be into it forever. And so what I've tried to do is diversify the products. That's why we started doing more shows, is because it's like, well, it's kind of the games as a service argument. Like, let's put a bunch of, irons in the fire and see what happens. And they've all kind of worked out in their own way for the most part. It's to try to just like survive by constantly evolving, but doing things consistently and knowing when time is up for certain products, like we did with Fireside Chats. So it's not that in 10 years, I hope we don't exist. I hope we exist. I just know that your favorite TV show goes away, your favorite band breaks up, like your favorite producer stops making movies, like whatever the case might be. And I don't want to have any expectation that like we're going to be rocking hard in 10 years. It's like, I hope so. I hope that's what the audience wants, but I think the audience might want different things, and might not want, I'm 40 years old. They might not want to hear from an old man, and I can accept that too.
Micah wheels you out like Professor X in the wheelchair.
Right. Exactly.
It's like, hello, kids.
Exactly. And because I have the Elon Musk mind chip in my mind, I'm actually communicating like Professor X as well.
Looking forward to it. That'll be a good episode.
Yeah.
I had some Patreon questions here. How many years will it take for PlayStation to either be day and date PC or start delivering games to Xbox or Nintendo more frequently? Tentpole titles or first party games? That's from Goat Gaming.
Yeah, this is a great question. And something I got into recently on SideQuest, I want to say, was it's like I look at. So I am much more aggressive as a PlayStation fan than I think most PlayStation fans are, and I hear from my audience a lot that they disagree with a lot of my opinions on this. But here's how
people disagree with you.
Oh yeah, a great deal.
I'm shocked.
I think Sony should be way more aggressive with PC games, because I think what we've learned, just anecdotally, but based on external data, is that when you remove the novelty of a PlayStation game on PC, there's not that much of an appetite for them, and that you aren't really the Venn diagram of PC players that are interested in PlayStation games but that will never buy a PS5 is pretty substantial over the people that don't have a PC or want to play on PS5. So in other words, I think these are two different audiences, and I think we've learned that over time. So when you see early sales data for like Spider-Man 1, Days Gone, Helldivers is obviously an anomaly, but you see these really strong sales and really strong concurrence. But when you compare Horizon to Horizon 2 or Spider-Man to Spider-Man 2 or Miles Morales and things like that, people shed, and the games are getting better. So it's not because of that. I think it's because there's a novelty factor to having those games available there. And because that novelty factor exists and there's a small group of people there that don't cross over with the PS5 and will never buy a PS5, just cater to them. Like, you don't lose anything. Like, I really, truly believe that. If you release Horizon 3 on PC and PS5 at the same time, I really don't know that you lose anything. And I think that it's reasonable to have expected that you would have lost something, but I think the data just shows that these are two different groups. So they should be aggressive with PC.
The older demo prefers the console experience, and the younger demo just wants to play with whatever they have. And you know what most people have today? A PC. So I agree with you. I do think that they should be more aggressive with PC, even if it's 6 months versus a year or 2 years. Right. But they've been pretty clear that they're not going that route. Yeah,
I don't think they're going to. And I think Shu kind of alluded to them not really going down that road. And there are rumors that even some ports of PS5 games that were going to PC have been canceled, because I think that they are not showing the sales numbers that they want to. But to me, I just think that is a reinforcing principle of why it doesn't really matter. Like, if you're only selling 100,000 copies over there, it's like, so I can understand the argument of saying the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like, we're not making enough money. But I don't understand the argument of saying like that hurts PlayStation.
Yeah.
Because it's like 100,000 people are buying the game there. There are 75 million PS5s and 120 million PS4s. So you're just missing the forest for the trees. This is free money. And it's what Shu was saying. It's like
printing money, he said. Something
right.
Like
it's
that.
like it's printing money. And I think that's a relevant, if you care about PlayStation games, I think that is a relevant factor. So I don't think they're going to be more aggressive there, but I think that they should be. And then Switch. So I think, and this is where the audience really starts to disagree with me, is like, I don't think and Switch 2 is going to be more powerful than a PS4, but less powerful than a PS5. And I just think that releasing, like, who cares if you release Infamous Second Son on the Switch 2?
Or I'd be furious. Killzone 2?
The Uncharted
How
trilogy.
dare you?
Right. Like, it's like, I think you should just go
Sly Cooper?
That's what, like, and that's the thing, is like, you could release Ratchet 2016, but Ratchet 2021 is not going to even run on the Switch 2. And this gets into what I was saying to my audience too. So I'm like, if you think about PC not really being a competitor for PS5 because they're two different ecosystems, then you look at the Switch and a Switch 2 in a little bit of a different way, in that you're like, this machine literally cannot run the new games. So you don't even have to worry about that. it's all legacy titles. Like, if you're worried intellectually, like, oh my God, I need my PlayStation exclusives only on PlayStation, it's like, okay, cool. Returnal's never going to Switch 2 because it wouldn't run, and so like, it's like that there could be a generational delineation where it's like everything that's old, they've already squeezed the fuck out of. If you care again about PlayStation, maybe you would say like, well, why not go get a few more million copies sold of X, Y, and Z on Switch? So, but the audience really disagrees with me there. Xbox. I think Sony's opinion on this, if I'm being honest, is like, we have no reason to put games on Xbox because
They won't do it.
I think, I think you saw evidence of this recently, right? Like Freedom Wars, when that came back, no Xbox version of it. Even though Bandai Namco is licensing it, Sony still won't let them. Or Lego Horizon, which was on Switch but not Xbox. Like, I think they look at it and say like, we have our knees on their necks. There's no reason for us to help them and have bad PR to sell 500,000 copies of Helldivers 2. We don't care. And so I think that that's their opinion there. So I think that each platform is kind of different, where it's like Xbox is the most direct competitor, and they've kind of capitulated in some sense by putting their games on PlayStation. So why would you interrupt them? Like, and I think it goes back to the PC thing where it's like, you want people on PlayStation to spend money on PlayStation if you're a PlayStation fan, right? To like continue the ecosystem's health. Then you would look at Xbox as being the most dire and direct competitor to that reality. And you wouldn't want to give them any help, even if like, yeah, I make 70 and you make 30. It's like, what if we both make nothing and we just keep it exactly the way it is? And it's the meme, right? Like, blue box gets blue plus green. Green box gets green. That's a pretty powerful image, in my opinion. And I don't often give the memers that kind of credit, but it's like, that is a pretty powerful thing. And I think Sony knows that. So that's my opinion. But will games pop up there? I have no idea. I really don't.
I think it's the old adage, don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake, at least from PlayStation's perspective.
Yeah, Sun Tzu, right? Said that, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Absolutely. Why would you stop them? Oh, you're going to put all the Xbox games over here? Okay. Do we have to do anything? No. All right, sure. Yeah, we'll take Forza Horizon 5 and whatever else. Like, why would they say no? The only thing is, I do think, and you and I don't agree on this, you think there's more to figure out, but I think the next Xbox console, it's going to be more like a PC. You're going to be able to install Steam and Epic Game Store. We talked about it when I was on your show.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the Trojan horse of Xbox getting PlayStation games. But you're stuck on the financials. I think Windows is a similar situation where, Microsoft owns Windows and people install games on there that they don't own. So
yeah, I am interested for like, you're right, but Windows is software, right? Solely. And I think that I don't know how this plays out, that this helps Xbox. Like, Xbox is too big of a brand. It's what we said on my show about like, Logitech releases like some sort of handheld gaming system, but it's Logitech. It's a small company, and they're happy to just kind of sell it and let you run whatever you want on it and make $100 a unit or whatever. But Microsoft isn't in the business for that. They're in the business for you to like spend money on Xbox store. So opening it up to other storefronts, which will not split their money for any reason. Like, there's just no way that's going to happen. I feel like it seems like a good idea until you really think about how it would be executed. That would help Microsoft.
I hear you. We'll see how it plays out. I do feel like that's where they're going. Phil Spencer
I do think
hinted,
that you're right.
He hinted as much.
Yeah.
I do want to know what's the play there in terms of revenue, because there's something like they've been pretty clear that that's where they're going. Okay. How does that work financially? And I understand that question, but I do think that's where they're going. So I do think we will be playing PlayStation games on our consoles or whatever they are, via Steam. And
I wonder
we'll see how
if
that
there would
works.
be any way for Sony to even stop that from happening. I don't, except for taking their games down. I don't think so. So it's like, that would be a super cool machine. Don't get me wrong. Like, it would be awesome to have that level of choice. Even a PlayStation launcher for PC, which is another thing that I would like to see.
They work on Steam Deck. It'll be similar to a Steam Deck, I think.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But again, Steam Deck has sold like 3 million units. We're so in this like ecosystem that it seems like it's this thing everyone has and wants, and I'm like, it's sold like literally 1/8 the amount of Vitas.
Well, I think that's the only metric that they've ever publicly said, and then they just kind of stopped after like the first year. I don't know what the latest has been, but yeah, their metrics are not 30 million. And when you compare that to people who call Xbox a failure because they've only sold 32 to 36 million units, I'm just like, I don't think there's any world where if Sega got back on the console market, they'd be like, oh, we did so terribly. We only sold 35 million consoles over 4 years with part shortages. And yeah, there's a weird conversation about Xbox success metrics versus PlayStation. And anyway,
I don't think we have enough specificity, unfortunately, with Xbox to even really know.
I agree. And I think it's really dumb of them to obfuscate their numbers. Just tell us your numbers. PlayStation, I go to a web page, I can see every single sales metric for all of their consoles. I can see their monthly active users. Their earning reports are crystal clear. I can make a spreadsheet. I can do analysis. And you go to Xbox, what is it? PC computing hardware, gaming sale. Like, it's this weird terminology where you can't even really get a good idea of how well their gaming is. But then when they say, oh yeah, we had another 40% decline in hardware year over year, it's like, what? Like, how are you going to be alive in 2 years?
Yeah, it's
in terms of the current generation. They are.
It goes back all the way to the beginning of the Xbox One era. Like, they shared Xbox One numbers originally, and then they just stopped
after about 3 years. Yeah,
and yeah, 3 years, I guess it was, and then it sucks just because I'm interested. I understand why they would hide it if you think it could be used as a cudgel against you. But I would remember that even during the PS3's like really rough start, Sony was still sharing numbers. So I just I'm a little frustrated by that because I wish we knew more. That was what was so interesting about the FTC stuff with Activision was all the leaks and all of the documentation. It's like we never really got an insight into the company like this before. It's unfortunate that we had to get it like this, you know.
It was like Christmas every time a document came out there, like starting with Brazil. I was really into it. Another question here. With your deep understanding of PlayStation's history and strategy, where do you see Sony heading in the next 5 years, especially regarding first-party exclusives, live service games, and potential acquisition? Thanks. I enjoy Last Day Media. That's from David.
Oh, thank you, David. I don't know, really. I think that we'll get PS6, I think, in 2028. I mean, that's my prediction. I don't feel like there's any rush. And I think PS5 is still yet to really crest. Like, I think Grand Theft Auto is going to push so many PS5s, it's not even going to be fucking funny how many PS5s they're going to sell this fall. And
they're 2% behind. I think GTA 6, I think you're going to see potentially like a 10% increase over where PlayStation 4 was. It's going to be huge.
Yeah,
because they have two SKUs.
Right. I think college football showed too that. So
yeah,
when college football came out, and I was like, this game is going to be huge. I didn't think it was going to be as big as it was. It's like the biggest game of the year. But I was like, this game's going to be huge. And I wonder if Xbox Series S benefits the most because casual people that want to spend the least amount of money are going to, like, they just want to play this. But PS5 ended up being the biggest beneficiary. And that really surprised me. I was like, really? PS5? And so with Grand Theft Auto, I'm just like, yeah, I assume that the same thing's going to be true, that even though you would assume the cheapest, lowest common denominator would be the biggest beneficiary, it might be PS5. So I just think that Sony's easily looking at a console that's going to reach PS4 sales, I would assume. And there's a hunger for console gaming still, just like there's a hunger for handheld gaming, Nintendo has proven. And I think they have to kind of stay the course in terms of getting the most out of the PS5. It's going to be an unusually long generation, I think. It's crazy that we're entering the 5th calendar year of the generation. It doesn't feel like it. But I think we'll get a PS6, and then I think it'll be a traditional piece of hardware. But I think after that, it's really unknown because as you know, because you've been in the industry for so long, like we've been long predicting this console-less future, cloud gaming, like whatever the case might be, and yet we're in this stagnant.
It's going to change,
but it will change. It will change one day, and I think that maybe we will finally see that change in the 2030s. And
that's what I said.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So we're great minds. And then by 2040, I just think that console gaming as we understand it just simply won't exist. It's hard for me to believe that we will be playing like we're playing now in 2040. So PlayStation, I think, ultimately needs to, and I think they're doing it, is like they need to turn themselves into a brand that's greater than the console. I think that's why PlayStation Production's success is so interesting with the Uncharted movie and Gran Turismo, but of course The Last of Us and all this other stuff, Twisted Metal. They're trying to like transmedia themselves better. They're trying to put themselves in more places, playing nicer with PC, PSVR 2 playing on PC. I think ultimately they're going to become more and more open.
In 2000,
I just don't think Xbox becomes the beneficiary of this because I think Xbox as a console will be gone by then. And so
it'll just be everywhere else.
Right. It will be like a TV app or something.
It already is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way. In 2010, we were all driving gas cars. We commuted in nightmare commutes, and we would run out of gas. We would have to work on a car. Now we have robots that can get groceries for us, and fully self-driving cars that can take you across this entire state without you touching the steering wheel, unless you have to like remind it to self-drive. So if that's the advancements that the auto industry has had in 15 years, do you really think, and I challenge any gamer out there, do you really think we're going to be in the same ecosystem that we've been in for the last, I don't know, 20 years? It's going to change and evolve.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think infrastructure is the only thing that's holding it back. And I think it's a reasonable expectation to question where the infrastructure for internet will be in 10 or 15 years. But I think that things are going in such a direction where it's like, I think we have this visual still, even going back to the 90s of, I don't know if you remember the commercials that used to be like, this is broadband, this is the way.
Yeah.
And it was. And they were laying all, but I actually think it's like, now it's just going to be wireless, 6G or whatever. In other words, getting to rural communities, getting to out of the way areas is going to be a lot simpler. It's still going to require infrastructure and laying of cable and all of that, but it's not like every house needs to get its own cable set up and it's like, I think we have to look at it in a more modern way, but I think that's the way we looked at it 10 or 20 years ago. It's why it was so revolutionary that the original Xbox had an Ethernet port, right? It was like, that was what it was, but I don't think it's going to be what it is. And so
you'll have your mind chip.
Right, exactly. I'll have my mind chip from Elon Musk. And so I'm interested to see what that future looks like, because I'm very much a console person.
Yeah.
And how will I adapt to that? And how will I adjust? And will I just become a PC player or just play the games in different ways? Who knows? But I'm going to have to confront that in the coming 10 or 15 years, I assume.
Probably. Colin, I had one last question for you, and I do apologize if it's inappropriate to be asking just in advance, but I've been watching your show and enjoying it. And in every episode, I see that drum set behind you.
Oh,
and I've never seen you play it. Will you play a little riff, or no?
Okay, yeah, if you want me to.
Just the heaviest metal thing you got. Little Dream Theater. Throw some Dream Theater.
I'm working on let me see here. Hold on a second. Hopefully it doesn't.
It'll pick up. He's had it for so long. I've always wanted to hear what he's got.
Is that good?
Yes, excellent. All right, not bad.
Come through right? I don't even know.
Oh, it came through great. Yeah, that was wonderful.
I'm working on. That's the song I'm working on now, which is people might recognize it. It's sloppy right now, but Green Day's "Amenius Sleepus" from the Dookie record is what I've been working on recently. So a little sloppy still, very fast. Trey Cool is such a fast drummer, very intimidating to play. But does it sound okay? I don't know.
It came through actually really clear.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. One of my old roommates in like high school, college years, he was a drummer, and he played Dream Theater. He opened for Rush.
Oh,
like,
sick.
He was actually pretty good, yeah, in the Wisconsin area. But I always see your drum set, and I was like, does he actually play, or is it like?
Oh, no, yeah, I play. I started playing drums in middle school, and then I played through high school and college, and I was in a band, Paper Champ. And then when I moved to California, I lived in apartments and all the rest, and I couldn't play anymore. So I stopped playing, and then when I moved here, I got a drum kit, and I've been picking it back up the last few years. So I was probably better when I was younger, but I love still playing. And every day I just put on my headphones and just play along to songs and just stick around. It's fun. Nice release for me.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Colin, thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate the little playoff there at the end.
No problem. Yeah, I hope it came through okay.
It came through great. I think people are going to really like it.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for making the time to chat with me and having me on your show. I really do appreciate everything that you have created over the last 7 years with Last Stand Media. I do think your voice, while I don't always agree with you, and I think it brings a unique perspective that it's interesting to discuss, and you get people talking. And I think that's important. I think we should talk about our thoughts about the games industry more. And I think we should be more open to different perspectives that we don't agree with. And I hope we can get closer to that.
Yeah,
so thank you for joining me, and congrats to 7 years. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. No, I wanted to say thank you for the kind words and thank you for all of that. I agree. Like, I like talking to people and I like disagreement. I don't like acrimony or anything like that, but it's like fun to like get to the root of things and try to like change people's minds or at least express yourself. And I'm surprised more people aren't into that, but I think a lot of people like being in their little echo chambers, and that's fine too, if that's what you're looking for. But, and I want to congratulate you on your new endeavors. And, you know, I've said it to you, I've said it publicly and privately, is like, you really were the archetype of like what would become the standard for the games industry, of the multidisciplinarian. You know, I've worked with a lot of people, as you have, and like, you really are one of the great talents that I've worked with, in my opinion. Like, so I think that, you know, you're right where you need to be, and I'm proud of you and your new endeavors, and I wish you the very best. I hope we can collaborate again soon.
I would look forward to that. Thank you so much for joining me, Colin. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I'm your host, Dustin, and this is Colin Moriarty. I'm going to get out of here, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.
If you want to support this channel, you can do so very easily by hitting that subscribe button, hitting that bell, or hitting that like button when content goes live. But a very special shout out to the patron members who support at the highest tier: Christopher Eddy, Inner Machine, Phil Roney, Savage 03, Spingetter 889, and the Scarecrow 121. There are a ton of supporters for this channel. Thank you, everyone. If you want to see some of my other work, be sure to check out my Assassin's Creed Shadows preview, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now.